Hello and welcome. This is Ratatosker. In this video I want to talk about Monster Hunter's combat and how to learn to enjoy it. Because enjoying it is not the easiest thing to do. It's a very common story in the Monster Hunter community, where someone new to the series will get a very bad initial impression of Monster Hunter, almost to the point of hating it. They then drop the series, and then give it another try at a later date. And then for some reason, the gameplay clicks with them the second time, and they end up being the kind of people that enjoy the game the most. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to a lot of my friends that I got into Monster Hunter, and it happened to a lot of the bigger named Monster Hunter YouTubers as well. So this video is aimed specifically at that group of people. People that have never tried Monster Hunter, or people who have tried it but have so far found that they don't like the way the combat works. They don't understand why it's so appealing. So in this video I'm going to explain why it's so appealing. And hopefully you find my description compelling enough to give Monster Hunter the time it needs to click. Let's get started. The monsters in Monster Hunter are comparable to boss battles in Dark Souls or Elden Ring. The two games share an emphasis on timing. Movement in these games is relatively high commitment, more so than it is in other action games. And so when you perform an attack, you won't be able to do anything else until the attack completes and the animation plays out. In high commitment games like this, combat is about finding openings. It's about finding an opportunity to attack. It's about finding an opportunity to heal. You dodge, block, and position yourself so that you can exploit those opportunities. And when finally the moment comes, you attack as much as you can. This rhythm is the heart of both Dark Souls and Monster Hunter combat. But Monster Hunter takes it a step further, because the weapons themselves are complicated and have a very high skill ceiling. They each have a gimmick, and they each have different goals during combat. Just as an example, the longsword has 3 spirit levels. Its goal during combat is to increase those spirit levels by either stringing together a series of attacks or countering a monster's attacks. The longsword's damage increases the higher the spirit level. Once your spirit level reaches maximum, at that point you want to spend your spirit levels to do your highest damaging skills. The longsword in general is a counter-heavy weapon, and its gameplay revolves around putting yourself in harm's way, because ironically, there is where you're safest, so long as you know what you're doing and can time your counters properly. In contrast, the Insect Glaive's gimmick is that it can get buffs from the monster's body parts. You send out your insect to go and collect extract from those body parts, and then return them back to you to gain the buff. Different parts of the monster's body contain different kinds of extracts, and getting all 3 at the same time gives you the maximum bonus possible for all of them. In general, the Insect Glaive has fewer access to counters than other weapons. It excels more at finding a way to position yourself properly. Your incredible aerial mobility allows you to do just that, while also doing good damage along the way to your new position. Now, the descriptions I've given for these 2 weapons are extremely simplistic. They don't fully capture how complicated the movesets can actually be. There are nuances and intricacies that would take a lot of time to get into for each of them. The point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of the weapons are very different. They don't play or feel like each other, and they are each very complicated in their own way. Unlike in Dark Souls, you don't just press R1 to attack when you find an opening. How each weapon takes advantage of an opportunity can look very different, and in fact, what each weapon even considers an opportunity can vary as well. A lot of people like to say that the weapon complexity of Monster Hunter is similar to how fighting games work, with some weapons having complicated combos and attacks that string into each other in interesting ways. This complexity is the barrier to entry for Monster Hunter. It's the reason why so many people get overwhelmed with the system and don't engage with it and end up not liking it. There's very little in the game by way of tutorial. What the game does have is something in your Hunter's Notes that describes some of the basic combos, but you're more likely to learn and understand more just from experience or from going online and finding some YouTuber to show you all the intricacies of the weapon. Now, I know that for a lot of people listening, you are going to find that extremely off-putting, and it is, but if you can get through that initial hurdle, it's also extraordinarily fun. It's an incredibly well-made system. It's extremely engaging, it's extremely rewarding, and it's very, very satisfying to achieve a level of mastery with your weapon. And that's before we even get to the monsters. Because the weapon is just the tool by which you interact with the monsters. The monsters themselves are the game's main appeal. They all have different kinds of attacks, different kinds of personalities, different levels of aggression. They move differently. You'll have to figure out how to use your newfound weapon knowledge to overcome the challenges that each new monster presents. Some use a variety of elemental attributes that, if land, can inflict you with elemental blights, which serve as debuffs or other status ailments. They'll also use poison or paralysis. As the game progresses, the monsters become harder and more challenging. Ideally, they'll eventually become challenging enough that you'll want to upgrade your weapons and armor. You can make builds in Monster Hunter, and if you're facing a difficult monster that's proving to be a wall for you, you can make weapons and armor to more effectively deal with it, with the parts from monsters that you've defeated previously. If a monster's fire attacks are doing a lot of elemental damage to you, you can get an armor set that's particularly resistant to fire, or craft a weapon with the element or ailment that monster is weak to. Finally, of course, you can just get good. You learn the monster's movesets, you master its timings, you get a sense for when they're going to attack and with what kind of attack. You learn its tells. As the game progresses, things become increasingly difficult. It demands more from you as a player. It demands that you understand your weapon better. It demands that you learn the monster's moveset. It demands that you understand how to make an effective build. You need to know which skills are most effective with your weapon, and have the good sense to change your build if the situation demands it. And then finally you get to the very hardest content at the end of their expansions. For Monster Hunter World Iceborne, that was Elantrion and Fatalis. To give you a sense of how hard they were at the time of their release, I would say that they are harder than anything Dark Souls ever managed to produce in a boss fight, with the only possible exception being Malenia from Elden Ring. Those two were brutally difficult. But overcoming them was the appeal of Monster Hunter. It's about learning your weapon, it's about learning the monster, it's about learning the pre-preparation aspects and build-making parts of Monster Hunter. And between the interplay of those three things is where Monster Hunter will click for you. The combat in Monster Hunter is incomparable. It's in its own genre. I don't think you'll fully understand what I'm talking about unless you experience it yourself. But I hope that what I've described to you sounds appealing. Appealing enough for you to give Monster Hunter the time it needs to get you hooked. If it works, you are in for a game that'll give you experiences you won't be able to find anywhere else. And that's the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching.